Thanks for joining us. This is The Economy. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. With me in my office right now is Datuk Siobhan celebrating a 10th year as the CEO of the American Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, or AMCHAM. Siobhan, thank you very much for coming over.
Delighted to be here.
I know in our preamble just now, yes, it has been apparently 10 years. Very quick, I guess, review of the decade of leading the Chamber of Commerce. When you first started off a decade ago, did you, I guess, have some form of expectations about what should be in the next 10 years? And did the expectations come to materialize?
You know, I think when I came, thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. But, you know, I think when I first took on the role, it was really what can we be doing at the Chamber to actually help Malaysia grow, and how do we use the companies that have been here, how do we give them a platform where they can be heard? And I think that was the only expectation, is how do we actually make the Chamber useful for both the American companies, but also for the Malaysian government to see the value that American companies be here.
And then, of course, I wouldn't presume, but I would assume that under the administration of Obama and Biden, it wouldn't be as much work as you had to do under Trump 1 and Trump 2. Is that a fair expectation or an assumption to make?
No, I think the workload has always been exactly there. It's just sometimes accelerated. You know, sometimes what's that phrase where they say sometimes in weeks you live decades, and so I think there is an element of there's always pressure to make sure that the relationship is good, and there's always that the businesses are trying to make the best of the situations. And look, we went through COVID, so you know, I would never say that this is any worse or better than COVID, because it's just an accelerated time frame. So I think each of the administrations had their different impact. But I would say, I think AMCHAM has been really busy from day one.
Multilateral ties, in view, one cannot underestimate or underscore the importance of having excellent relations with the US. With the tariff hitting a lot of markets and the conversations that followed last year, at least during the ASEAN Summit, and the kind of agreements that has been made, including the ART and the like, only now we're seeing the kind of after effects of it, or the aftershocks of it. How or what would be some of your expectations of the Chamber in navigating these recent ongoings, and how would it be different this year compared to last year?
It's an interesting question, but I would say that, you know, the relationship between Malaysia and the United States has been, it's, as you know, over 50, 60 years old. You know, it's formal relationships, especially in commercial terms, it even goes into 100 years. And so if you look at that basis and that foundation that was laid mostly through commerce, because, you know, businesses come here and they can realize that they can actually be successful in Malaysia. And that relationship has got a very, very strong foundation. And I think part of the Chamber's role is to expose how strong that is. And I think what this recent time has exposed for us and for everybody around, and maybe even the man on the street, is that the relationship between Malaysian-based businesses and the US market is actually stronger than people realized. And there's opportunity there. It's the world's largest consumer market. Malaysia exports. So why wouldn't you want to have that relationship? So I think for the Chamber, the challenge is going to be, how do we support that deepening of that relationship, making the trade easier for both sides. And I know it sometimes comes in fits and spurts. It sometimes comes in being, you know, in the last year, some would say aggressive action. But at the end of the day, I think there's some good in it. The fact that the marketplace is there. The ART agreement, the agreement on reciprocal trade, the ART, is actually secures that market for Malaysian-based companies. And this is, when I say Malaysian-based, it's not just American companies, but it's also anybody based in Malaysia. So Malaysian companies here, especially local companies, have an opportunity to sell and sell more and embed themselves into that marketplace and have a consumer. So it should be easier for them to be able to get the financing and knowing that they have a marketplace. So I think those are the things that we need to be able to unveil and showcase, so that Malaysians see the advantage of having that agreement in place and other agreements.
And what about the rate of tariff at 19%, doesn't this, I guess, deter businesses?
I think a lot of the 19% in the agreement that we have limits the amount of the impact of that. So a lot of the goods that Malaysia exports to the United States, for example, is already zeroed out. So semiconductor is almost, I think, 50-60% of that trade. It's at zero tariffs. However, one has to nurture that relationship. One has to be very mindful because the semiconductor or the electronics industry is one that is starting to see risk manage its own supply chains. So Malaysia has to nurture that supply chain relationship, making sure that the cost of doing business in Malaysia is managed so that it can take advantage of the agreements that it has in place. And Malaysia has got a number of different trade agreements. And so it's not just about trade to the America, but it's also trade to the rest of the world. A lot of American companies are here not purely for the US, but only a portion of their business may go to the United States. But they can leverage their ability and capacity for the rest of the world. So I think Malaysia is in that wonderful sweet spot where you can actually trade with both, establish your presence here so that you can actually trade with the rest of the world. And I think that's what we're looking to try and do. How do we encourage that and embed that even further?
What about the, I guess, reaction from the members of your chamber? Are they more optimistic about how things are going to pan out for the rest of the year and for the years to come?
I think so. I mean, I think the trading relationship with the US right now, I think it's one of the strongest. It has, I think we have really sound understanding of what it takes to trade with the US. And I think we can build on that. So I think there is a level of optimism, but at the same time, there's a cautionary realism. But Malaysia is used to that. Malaysia is very pragmatic in the way that it approaches most things. And I think it's and I said recently, as long as Malaysia can have clarity of what its policies are, and if we can have collaboration to actually achieve some of those between businesses and the government, it has to be a win-win for both. And then I think we can worry about how competitive we are. And the region is getting much, much more competitive. Malaysia has been really lucky and in being able to be competitive over the years. But you've got Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, all rising up at different rates. And so Malaysia cannot rest on its laurels. It has to also be attentive to how quickly it's actually operating, putting the reforms, putting the agreements in place. It has to work, and it has to work faster to keep its edge. But Malaysia also is not just competing in the region. Malaysia is good enough that it's competing globally. So it's competing with Europe, like Poland. It's competing with Costa Rica. It's competing with Mexico. We have a number of companies saying, well, where do I put my supply chain? And a supply chain is not once and done. It's constant movement. So certain things, what does Malaysia want to put in place to Malaysia as we move up the value chain? Do we want to be doing more R&D? Great, so how do we invest in that? So how do we invest in our people and talent? Because if you're going to go up the value chain, it's going to rely on people and what people skills you have.
So you've touched on a few areas here. I'd like to deep dive on some of them. Number one is on talent gap and skills gap. How far are we when it comes to bring ourselves closer to global competitiveness, especially in high technology sectors like the semiconductor sector? Are we truly deprived of good talents, or are we nearly there, or are we even superseding some of our competitors out there? And more importantly, how do we close those gaps moving forward?
So there's a lot to unpack in all that. But I would say, look, Malaysia's got fantastic talent, okay? The number of Malaysians that do extremely well, not just locally, but also abroad. Within our companies, almost all our companies are above 90%, if not 100% Malaysians. So there's no glass ceiling. Malaysians can succeed in the American business ecosystem and go global as well. So we acknowledge that Malaysia has great talent. The question is, does it have enough, and can it feed the pipeline? And if it can feed the pipeline, then it can be competitive. Now we all know there's brain drain because there's always something more attractive going on around the world.
Yeah.
So how do we keep them in? How do we keep them in Malaysia? How do we encourage them to deliver and stay here and deliver? They may go, but let's see whether we can bring them back. But skills, I think the skills are there. The question is, can we feed that pipeline? Are we doing enough in the education system to make sure that there are actually Malaysians going into these industries that we want to encourage them to be in? Do we have enough chemical engineers? Do we have enough people who want to get into logistics, who can actually be data sensitive or be able to do the analysis? Are we feeding that pipeline? And if we are, then we have to be competitive in the pricing. We have to be able to, and I'm not saying about low cost, we shouldn't be low cost, but we should be competitive. But we also need talent mobility. We need talent to come in and go out. We need to be able to take advantage of foreign talent as well. And I'm talking not the kind of what we always gets, the labor level, even though those are important as well, but also the high-tech environment. How do we get the people who are working at the highest levels in encouraging, not necessarily out, because you want them to stay. If they don't stay here, they're going to go to Thailand, they're going to go to Vietnam, and they will accelerate. So you want them to embed themselves here and constantly bring up Malaysian talent, become Malaysian talent that then go abroad. So I think the talent piece is very exciting. We have a lot of untapped talent. How do we tap them? We need more women in the workforce. We can add, probably a number of, we can certainly add to the GDP if we can bring more women into the workforce. We're working now, we just signed an MOU with Pehebat to see how much of the armed forces talent that retire, when they're in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, how do we bring them into how do we upskill them so they can be contributing to the workforce? Malaysia's problem is that it's small, so therefore, you can't compete on numbers, so we have to compete on quality. So, because Vietnam's population is a multiple of ours, Indonesia is a multiple of 10. So how do we be specialized, and how do we make sure that we have the best talent and we can attract the best talent and from abroad to make sure that we are having the best environment?
One of the things that the Malaysian government did last year, that's worth talking about it on this point, is on bringing ARM over and try to boost local companies to actually use some of the patents that is being held by ARM to actually establish our own Malaysian-based semiconductor companies, especially on the higher end of the value chain. Do you feel that the Chamber is looking into specialized areas like this, as well as trying to see where entrepreneurs in Malaysia can actually move and become a large firm in these highly specialized sectors? Is that part of the thing that you're looking at as well?
Well, as I said, the Chamber is here to support the businesses that are already here. We look and expose opportunities. But as far as using vehicles like ARM, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a build. And so how do we actually encourage people to take advantage of the opportunity that exists in, say, a deal like that? But there are multiple opportunities. You've got good local firms that are coming out. A lot of them have been trained by the Germans and the American companies that have been here for 50 years. So these are really, really strong local companies. How do we get Malaysian talent to see the value of being in a Malaysian company, see the value of working with the foreign companies that are here, and really kind of pushing the boundary of becoming an entrepreneur beyond that? We've seen one wave where you've got the companies that engineers that worked for Intel have started up their own companies, and now they're established Malaysian companies. What's the next wave, and where does it need to be? And is it not it's not just in manufacturing, but in design and in the services? How do we do that? As we go up the value chain, services are going to become much, much more important. So how do we make that much more relevant and let the students who are in the schools today see that pathway? And I think part of the Chamber's responsibility is also to expose that, to make sure that the younger people, in seeing by exposing what's happening in their country, is happening so that they can participate.
Speaking about talent mobility that you spoke of just now, are you then of the opinion that lax labor laws or labor laws that facilitate greater talent movement, talent mobility should be in place or introduced by the government? Are you also looking at some form of free mobility amongst ASEAN members, the way we see amongst EU members? Are those kind of things that would facilitate that closure or the the narrowing of the skills gap that we speak of right now?
Well, to narrow the skills gap, you need to have the best talent available, right? So you need to not just learn from them, but be working with them. It's all about collaboration. It's not a train and leave. It's how do we work with you? Because we're working at the highest levels. Okay, so we want that. We want that collaboration. I think the talent mobility piece, it's not black and white. It's not about being lax. It's about being thoughtful and deliberate about what talent you want in the country to accelerate the areas that you want to go in. So NIMP is very clear about where it wants to go. So are we facilitating that exchange of knowledge through talent? The Johor, Singapore, SEZ, Special Economic Zone, how do we use that economic zone to make sure talent can go back and forth? In ASEAN, should there be greater mobility in talent? I would say absolutely. You know, because certainly the American companies are embedded in probably 3 or 4 of the ASEAN countries at any time. So you want talent to be able to move freely. So how do we do that? The tax, to make it more attractive, the JSCZ has lowered tax rates for certain segments. You know, are we doing that same thing for Penang or other areas in Selangor so that we can get the talent to be more mobile? I know, yes, you attracted us Johor, but we also are, while you're looking at regional in Malaysia, you also should be looking at Malaysia as a whole. So how do we get those talents in there? How do we make it more attractive for Malaysians to come back and be a productive part of that growth story? Because it's a fantastic growth story.
It is a fantastic growth story. The question is, how do we sustain that particular growth and perhaps even reinvigorate it even further? Which falls back to my second line of thinking right now, following back to your earlier statement, which is how far is Malaysia when it comes to competitiveness, not just amongst our members in ASEAN, but globally? Do you feel that we are there yet in terms of global competitiveness as a country on top of the talent skills gap?
I think Malaysia's very competitive. I think Malaysia can be more competitive. I think that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, because you're going to be able to grow that talent. The better the talent is, the better, more competitive you can be. So the gap is, as Malaysia reached, there's a lot of talent. So how do we get them motivated? How do we get them? And to answer the question on competitiveness, look at the numbers of companies that are expanding in Malaysia. FDI coming in, yes, but also expansion. New companies coming in, medical device area, the medical technology area, exploding. Why? Because we have the talent. You know, if we didn't have the talent, we wouldn't be competitive. So how do we build it? And they're expanding and growing, and the companies that have been here are also growing. But they may be, you know, the arguments like they're shrinking, they're reducing jobs, but at the same time, where are they growing the jobs? And just because you may reduce 500 here, you may have a reduction of 500 jobs, but you may have an addition of 100 better jobs. So it's all about, you know, what is the quality? And with Malaysia being a small nation with a limited talent pool, then we have to have much, much better talent. We need to be able to compete at that niche level, be able to compete and make sure the talent that we do have is at that high value. And so that's I think the push. And so what are we doing at schools? What are we doing at universities? The TVET program, I know they're trying to streamline it. It probably could do a little bit more with streamlining, less overlaps, and actually being very deliberate and very, very focused so that we can move up that value chain, identify new jobs. You know?
And of course, that moves on to my third line of argument, I suppose, which is disruption of artificial intelligence. We're looking at reduction of labor-based workforce, automation, increment by various companies, large and small. Do you feel that all of this is now going to be no longer hypothetical, at least done in pilot programs? Things are going to be scaled up. How worried are you in terms of Malaysian companies trying to adapt and adopt to AI disruption moving forward?
I think the disruptions are going to be happening across the world. So everybody's going to be living the same journey. I think companies need to understand what they can automate. They also need to make sure they have the talent to be able to make the crossover. It's not an overnight situation. You've got to be able to cross over and identify where AI could help you. It's not about replacing jobs. You know, you may just find that this actually opens up the AI that you can do in a small company, for example, may identify a new opportunity. And what do you do with that? It has nothing to do with your operations, but actually maybe an insight that you get from the data that you've collected and you didn't realize you collected, and that might give you an opportunity. So are people open to that, or are they looking at purely at AI as a replacement of a automated solution? But you know, I think AI is much more than that.
Of
so
course.
how do we get people to think beyond the kind of short term and go into what it could do? But it's not for everybody. You know, it's like AI is not going to be the silver bullet that solves everything, but we need to understand how to work with it. It's our duty as leaders in organizations to help our employees understand how to use it, ask the right questions, which is why education is really important, because critical thinking is going to come. How do I use the AI? What questions should I be looking for? What solutions am I trying to solve before I deploy the AI? And, you know, and do I do it on everything, or do I understand what I need to do and how is it going to deploy?
The government is launching the education plan that combines the K-12 education as well as the higher education. What would be some of the thinking that you have when you want to review such an education plan? What are you looking for in this kind of so-called comprehensive cradle-to-grave education plan that the government is launching very soon?
Well, I think, you know, I'm not an educationalist, and I certainly am not in academia, but I would say, does the plan inspire children? Okay, let's start with inspiration. Does it inspire them to look beyond the textbook? What does it actually start them to think of the future that you and I will never see, potentially? Or it's going to be our grandchildren's future or our children's future. You know, what is that going to look like? When we were small, the movies gave us an idea. But now that those movies and those stories are happening on everybody's phone. So how do we inspire the children from a very young age? Okay, and then once they get into school, how do we give them the tools to be able to build on that aspiration? And I think that's the role of education, is be able to help the children expand so that they can actually then, by the time they come into the workforce, they are actually generating some ideas and new ideas and pushing themselves, their companies, and the country ahead. Because, I mean, I always say part of it is being present. When you come to your job, be present, bring yourself to the role, and leave a little bit of you, and then you make an impact. But I think if we don't inspire the youth, whether they're at your mother's knee from very small, into primary, into secondary, we will lose a lot of opportunities. So every child, I think, in Malaysia, I hope, will have the opportunity to think beyond the textbook.
And then, of course, what would be your review and comment following some of the things that we've done over the past 1 year, I suppose, or 2 years, especially when Trump visiting KL and trying to see all these kind of policies being brought about, and the status that we are right now when it comes to education, the talent, and our competitiveness and the like. How you know, in your latest article with The Edge, you were talking about realism with optimism or something to that effect. Basically, you know, you gotta marry your optimism with the things that you're working with right now. Generally speaking, that was the tone of your op-ed piece. Is that something that you want to share with everyone as well, that we have to temper our expectations, but at the same time do not lose hope on optimism?
I think everybody has to be optimistic. If you're not optimistic, you know, we can't see the bright future, right? So you have to see the bright future. And it may be really hard sometimes. There are going to be times when you can't see that bright future. But, you know, the sun always rises to the next day. You know, so why not approach it with that bright future? And then look at, say, what can we do? What can we do today? What can we do tomorrow? And I think Malaysia is at that precipice, as I said in that piece. We are at an inflection point. The question is, are we ready to take that step to the next level? And can we do it with a very deliberate and thoughtful manner rather than just kind of scattergun? But let's be deliberate, let's be thoughtful, get clarity in what we're doing, clarity in the policy making, clarity in the implementation of that. And I think that the government is doing a really good job of that. It's trying to make sure that implementation as even and as clear as possible. There's a lot of digitization that's going on that will help that. And I think that clarity will help businesses grow. Whether you're foreign or local, it doesn't matter. The ability to use the tools that you have to give you a better business edge to be able to get things done quicker, faster, and more accurately. Quick and fast is great, but it has to be accurate. So that's the level. When I talk about realism, it's like deliberateness. What are we doing, and how do we move in that direction? Then I think it's that clarity is there. Can we do it on our own? No. We've all realized that we have to work with each other. Whether you're collaborating with academia, whether you're collaborating with a government body, or whether you're collaborating with people abroad, collaboration. The world is very, very big. We can't do it on our own. And we shouldn't try to do it on our own. I think we should be looking for partners. And I think, like I said, the ART, the art, gives us partners in the US as well, gives us ideas on how we can get funding from the Exim Bank from the US or from the DFC. So there are other partners outside the immediate realm for entrepreneurs to be able to tap into. And makes us competitive. So it's those three things that I think that I'm hopeful for, that we can be pragmatic, which Malaysia knows how to do.
Yeah.
All right, we've got decades of ASEAN pragmatism that was built in, but we also need to have a level of urgency. We need to do it, and we need to do it now. And the reason why is because the competitiveness around the world is picking up, it's getting faster, and technology and AI is going to be a leveler. So can we stay ahead?
I'd be remiss if I don't touch about politics and political risk, both in America as well as in Malaysia. The Venezuela story is, of course, still in the air now, with Greenland as well. Davos is taking place next week, and Trump is expected to give a keynote address at Davos at the World Economic Forum. In Malaysia, strings of politicians are now preparing themselves for elections. Would businesses, at least the members of the chamber right now, view political risk as increasing or decreasing, or do you feel that it's rather well mitigated, both here and abroad?
There are a lot of things we don't have any control over, and what's going on around the world, there's very little control that any of us have. I would say the secret sauce has been the fact that businesses are very pragmatic in their own way, and they look for what can they do within the structures that they live within. So I think that's how businesses are going to look at it and say, okay, this is the world that we live in. What do we need? What risk do we need to mitigate? What do we need to put in place so that we can continue and be sustainable? Because everybody's going to have a different outlook. So am I safe in these areas, or do I need to have an option, or do I have to have multiple options? So I think businesses are going to take the lessons from COVID, take the lessons from the last few years in trade and tariffs and everything else that's gone on in the world, the wars that we've had, or they've had to maneuver around. It's going to look at it and say, okay, how do we deal with a sustainable business that makes sense, that gives people jobs, that is can reap benefits and make sure that the communities around them are still well served. And I think businesses are going to carry on. Businesses, the great thing of working for a chamber is that we're dealing with that reality. Politicians will talk about a lot of stuff, but when it comes to businesses, they have to implement. And I think that's the fun part about being in a chamber, is working with the reality of actually implementation. And how do we actually on a daily basis make sure that the relationships, whether they are between different companies owned by different countries, or based from different countries, not owned, but based in different countries. How are they working with each other? How are we helping each other, collaborating, so that they can actually have a resilient and robust supply chain? And I think that's the ecosystem that Malaysia has, all in one place. It's a very unusual place. Malaysia has most of it embedded here and attracting more. So we should be very grateful, very thankful for those that have gone before us, but also what what advantage has that given to the Malaysians to be able to take it forward? And I think it's very optimistic, but we have to roll up our sleeves and get the work done.
So my final question to you, Siobhan, is this. We've seen how you have led the Chamber for the past 10 years. How will you lead the Chamber for the next 10 years, I suppose? Let's assume that you're going to be there for that long.
Yes, I know. The chant of 10 more years is resonating. I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, a chamber is as strong as its members make it. Okay. Without the support of the chamber, because we're an independent organization, we don't get funding other than the members, and so the members believe in us and the work that we do. To me, then that's the thrill of it, because that means it allows us to try and help them grow. So it's a small pie, but it can be a really interesting one, and you can have an impact. And I think if I can continue to make AMCHAM a strong place where it's relevant, and people find that they can actually find that collaboration and be a platform where we can discuss things, I think that's a win. And we just need to take it into the future and help those around us be the best that they can be. So, and I think that's, to me, if I can succeed in doing that for the next few years, that's great.
You are by far my most optimistic guest, at least for the past 6 or 7 episodes, I suppose. Thank you very much, Siobhan. That was Datuk Siobhan Das, the CEO of the American Malaysia Chamber of Commerce, or AMCHAM. If you've missed any part of this interview, or if you want to learn to watch some of the other interviews that I've had on the show, just head on to astro.awani.com. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one.